He was calling to say, "Get me out of here already."
Mr. White, could you give me a thumbs up if we are indeed on? We are on. Great. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Transportation Committee meeting of the Los Angeles City Council. Today is Monday, November 2nd, 2020, Election Day -1. In accordance with rules that the governor has set up during the pandemic, we are meeting electronically, and we are doing so and we'll be taking electronic public comment today. Members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on the agenda today should call 669-254-5252. That's 669-254-5252. And you want to use the meeting ID number 161-750-5079. And then press pound. And then press pound again when prompted for the participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press #9 to request to speak. Okay, I'll do a quick roll call. I am here, and Mr. Koretz is here, and Mr. Bruscaino is here. So we have a quorum and a full membership of the committee. So, colleagues, I was going to recommend for consent items 1 through 4. Does anybody want to discuss any of those items?
I think item 1 I'd like to pull for discussion.
Okay. Mr. Bruscaino?
I would move the balance.
Okay. And then we have the special item number 1 as well. So at this time, we will take public comment on...
Actually, that I think is the one I was referring to, the special item number 1.
Special one. Okay. All right. So let's take public comment on everything now, and I'll turn that over to Mr. Bruins to handle the public comment.
Okay, we have 3 people have called in for public comment. If you are the person calling from the last 4 digits of your phone number 7660, please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on. And you may need to press *6 to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yes. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on.
General public comment. I have a question before I begin. Since there are 2 meetings scheduled today, I'd like to ask that we're given 2 minutes to make public comment.
The special agenda or the special meeting does not have a general public comment, so you only have one minute.
Okay.
Okay.
Unless you may begin on that item on the special agenda.
Okay.
Okay, you may begin.
We have already provided the committee the statement and documentation regarding taxicab commission's improper handling of the process for reforming taxicab industry, and have urged this committee to exercise its oversight powers to ensure full compliance with applicable rules and regulations. We have seen no indication that the commission is willing or able to carry out its obligations under its current leadership to exercise its authority over the taxicab industry in an equitable and impartial way. We think we're entitled to have the city attorney's office review our objections and the commission's proceedings and address point-by-point issues we have raised in our objections, provide a written response, and instruct the commission to hold a thorough hearing and as required by the municipal code and other applicable regulations. It is imperative that the most consequential reform of the taxicab industry is not rushed, glossed over, and that the stakeholders are given a fair opportunity to have meaningful input in their future. Would also like to ask...
Thank you. Your time has expired. Okay. The next caller is the last 4 digits, 4617. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on, and press *6 to unmute.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes, this is, I would like to speak on public comment, and I would like to speak about, I'm Gary Vogan from the Taxi Workers Association of Los Angeles. I'm its secretary, and I would like to speak about...
You have 1 minute. You may begin.
Yes, we want to strongly object to votes that have been taken at the Taxi Cab Commission in the past few weeks. We believe that there has been a gross violation of our rights, that the Taxi Cab Commission is out of control. It recently had to rescind its vote on a measure that it hastily rammed through Board Order 89. It is a measure which would drastically affect the taxi cab industry, its livelihood, and restructure it in one of the most radical measures that it has ever taken. It would remove it the free cabs. This is an issue that will come before the Taxi Cab Commission, but we strongly object to the behavior of Mr. Eric Spiegelman. They cannot follow, taxi cab procedures in the municipal codes here in the city of Los Angeles. In Municipal Code 76.12, there have been no hearings about, the means and necessity of expanding the taxi cab fleets. We strenuously object, and the letter sent in by Mr. Slimovic, we stand behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, will the speaker with the last 4 digits, 9686, please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on. Press *6 to unmute. Caller with the last 4 digits, 9686. If you'd like to speak, please unmute yourself. Last chance, caller with the last 4 digits, 9686. Okay, that concludes public comment. Mr. Chair, turning it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruins. Much appreciated. All right, so that concludes public comment for today. With that, we'll go back to the items that were recommended for consent. I believe Mr. Buscaino had moved approval of items 1 through 4 on the regular agenda. Mr. Koretz, do you second?
Yes, I do second all those.
Okay, so without objection, do I need to do a roll call on that, Mr. White, or is that good?
I'll do that.
Okay.
Mr. Bonnet.
Aye.
Mr. Buscaino.
Aye.
Mr. Koretz.
Aye.
Items 1 through 4 on the regular agenda are approved.
Thank you very much. All right, that brings us to item number 1 on the special agenda.
Item number 1 on the special agenda is a Blumenfield-Bonin motion instructing LADOT and the Bureau of Street Services, with the assistance of the city attorney, to develop a regulatory framework for personal delivery devices that operate in the city's public right-of-way.
Okay, I believe we have Ms. Reynolds who's going to speak on this item.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, y'all.
Thank you, council member, and appreciate the opportunity to just sort of frame this issue. So over the last year and a half, there are several delivery companies, including FedEx, UPS, Postmates, and others, Amazon among them, that have been deploying sidewalk delivery robots in cities across the U.S. and across the world. The main reason for deploying these devices is to automate the very expensive last 50 feet of any delivery, and also to automate deliveries in and around dense urban areas where you may have a grocery store or a restaurant near to a lot of housing. And they're also used extensively on college campuses and other campus-like environments. So the challenges with them, and they've received a partial ban in San Francisco. San Jose is currently reviewing a permitting scheme for them. The challenges with them include that, like any other kind of robotics or AI-reliant technology, these devices are sort of in their early days of learning how to interact with individuals on sidewalks. There have been some issues associated with people with disabilities, people with mobility impairments, encountering these blocking curb ramps. people with visual impairments struggling to get the devices to acknowledge and move around them, or their guide animals. They really do. They are an example of a technology, and the business case for that technology is to automate and save delivery companies money. So from the city's perspective, we always have to be in the position of trying to make sure that when we deploy new technologies in the public right-of-way, they need to provide some sort of public benefit, especially if they are providing significant private benefit. So as we consider a regulatory framework for these, Department of Transportation is keenly interested in making sure that we understand, are these devices, for example, saving or reducing greenhouse gas emissions associated with delivery vehicles either circling and looking for parking or idling at the curb? Are they devices that could potentially collect data that might be useful for us from an infrastructure planning perspective? So, for example, could they get us information about curbside regulations, conditions of sidewalks, potentially even things like potholes, although it's not clear that they'll be able to collect data at that length. And then really considering what kind of fees ought to be associated with a program like this, both to have a solid enforcement, to fund the kind of enforcement you would need to do to respond to public complaints, and also potentially to establish fees that could be reinvested in infrastructure where the devices are actually serving the public. So these are some of the questions that we have about how we might be able to create a regulatory framework that will both invite in innovation, but also acknowledge that as these things scale, so if we're having, right now maybe there's one or two companies, there are 5 or 10 companies, hundreds of these things moving around our city, that we have regulations in place that allow us to manage the public right-of-way for the public good. So we would be considering using a similar kind of digital sort of technology that we use to manage and regulate micromobility, and considering doing this under the universal permit that this committee has reviewed and directed the Department of Transportation to develop for technology companies that are in the business of moving goods and people in the public right-of-way. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions or discussion that any of you are interested in having.
Mr. Kretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I suspect you won't be shocked at my opinion on this, which is I think there's absolutely no reason for robot deliveries for good public policy, like automating the ports, like automating vehicles so that Uber and Lyft can fire all their drivers, like drone deliveries, which certainly are a public safety danger. I think this is just a way for giant corporations to save money by eliminating tens of thousands of jobs. In the long run, they will literally eliminate millions of jobs at the end of the day. And what we that like to write science fiction envisioned 50 years ago, a society of mass unemployment because of automation, I believe is on our doorstep today. And as always, this is a... Sorry. Well, now you know what my ringtone is.
Looks like you got an overactive robot over there yourself.
Yeah, it's not exactly what it's quacked up to be. But
nice. Well played.
As always, I think this also is a safety versus technology issue. Do these robots stand aside when someone wheels up in a wheelchair or is walking up on the sidewalk in a walker, or do they force them off the road, as the Trump caravan did recently with the Biden bus, as we saw on TV? Or do they actually know how to stop and stand aside? Will they know to not put large packages where someone can see them, or will they stash them aside in the bushes like smart delivery people do now? Amazon already has eliminated thousands of small businesses and many, many thousands of jobs. This will allow them to finish that job, so to speak. Especially with a period of major unemployment that we are just starting to come out of, I should say. Doing this so that we can help unemploy many delivery folks for Amazon and other giant corporations just seems like a bad idea. This is allegedly serving the public, but I think it's serving the public on a platter. I think we are causing tremendous harm. So if by regulating we are able to strictly regulate, as in to make it difficult to do this, I'm good with regulation. If it means that we are just establishing a way for them to do this at their pleasure, but just make sure we get them to do it as well as we can, I would be in opposition. So one thing I want to do is get a sense of where this is headed. Are we trying to make this as easy as possible for them so they can fire all their delivery people that would otherwise hop out and deliver these packages? Or are we trying to control this so we could enact a partial or a complete ban if we so chose, as other places have done?
Well, I think I'm happy to give you my 2 pennies. I think that what you've raised is really a policy question for the council to opine on. As I said in sort of my opening remarks, my read of this business, this entire sort of industry, is that it does exist primarily to reduce costs, or in some cases eliminate them, for the last 50 feet of delivery. So, the idea that a single Amazon driver would pull up onto a block and deploy 10 of these to deliver goods to 10 addresses in in a much shorter period of time, there's a clear return on that investment for the delivery companies, or that, say, a Postmates might have a partnership with grocery store chain and use these robots to deliver groceries within a certain radius rather than paying drivers. It's very clear why companies would be interested. And it's also, to your point, Council Member, it's not directly clear that any of those savings would get passed on to consumers. And so the public good of having these things in cities is also one for us to question and to try and understand more intimately. Is there a public benefit? Do these things solve real problems that we're trying to address, either by lowering emissions, and perhaps there's a climate change counterbalance there, or by making the city more efficient in delivering services, by giving us data that we can use to repair sidewalk issues as they arise. All of those things are open questions, but it's very clear that these devices were not designed with those problems front of mind. And instead, they bring with them a whole set of questions about use of sidewalks, who and how we provide sidewalk access, and about their relative speed operating on those sidewalks. And then your question, which is about workforce development and jobs, and whether or not there's anything, whether or not it's appropriate, or there's anything that we ought to be doing through a regulatory mechanism to try and address that directly. So I guess I would describe myself as open but somewhat skeptical. And the approach would be that we would consider looking at a very limited deployment with a single company in one particular part of the city, a distinct period of time, to try and gather some information to make a determination about whether there is a real benefit here for the public and a trade-off that makes sense. And then to consider, based on our understanding of that and this council's understanding of that, how should we allow these things or not into the city? And if we are going to allow them, we are saving these companies money by allowing them. So we ought to, as a city, take that into consideration as we look at any fee structure or revenue stream that we might get from allowing these things to deploy in the public right of way. So that's my take on it, but I think that what you've raised are pretty nuanced and significant policy questions, and we would, be working in the direction of the council on those.
And if I could add one other thought, you'll notice in most of those industries, these are relatively low-wage workers, and as low-wage workers get pushes to be paid more with a decent minimum wage in some places like California, with a push to be paid as employees in California, those companies are trying to find ways to automate so they don't have to pay these folks anything. I think it's purely being driven by the fact that employees cost money and they want to eliminate those employee costs. So any way I can oppose this, that's what I'd be looking for. And if regulation gives us more opportunity to do that, I really would be for that.
Thanks, Mr. Kretz. Mr. Bruscano, do you have any questions?
Yeah, if I can, Mr. Chair, thank you. And I appreciate Mr. Kretz's comments and line of questionings. Look, I too understand the jobs perspective of this type of technology. As you know, at the port complex, we fought, and I'm proud of the council's action of reversing some decisions that were made with one of the terminal operators. But we also know today that these are agreements between employers and the employees. But at the same time, let's be mindful, we are a global city. This technology is innovation at its finest, but at the same time, companies should not come into the city of Los Angeles and go rogue. As Ms. Reynolds can attest to, and there are some frustrations with the department when I was frustrated that we are moving slowly on dockless bikes, and that there were some, it took us a while to get into some policy and decision making. And I said, you know what? Let's start in CD 15 as a pilot. Let's mobilize dockless bikes. Well, today they're dockless scooters, and I made a comment tomorrow could be dockless hoverboards. But we as a city ought to be prepared. And I agree with Ms. Reynolds. We need to invite innovation, but at the same time, strike that proper balance and ensure that we welcome these types of companies, but they need to come to the table and not go rogue on us. Quick question, Mr. Chair, if I can. Where are these devices being deployed, and have any of the companies approached the department or the city?
They have conversations with a few different companies, and I'm not sure if Jarvis Murray is on, but he is. He might be able to give you some details on that. I know that there was some interest in doing pilots in different parts of the city. To my knowledge, they are not yet deployed, fully deployed in Los Angeles, and the current request is we look at a deployment in a campus-like environment, someplace like Warner Center, where we could have a controlled environment, really see how they operate, use MDS to get information about them and their operations under, for example, a conditional use permit, similar to the way that we launched scooters. So we give a conditional use for a very short period of time under some very specific conditions, and we're able to get information, and then we can use that to develop the full program, similar to the way that we did with scooters, which hopefully will be a little bit quicker this time because we have a lot of that same sort of
data
from and information. We've got the data gathering all set up. We've got all of those things ready to go. And in this case, we also have our partner cities in San Jose and San Francisco that are a little bit ahead of us, and so they've done a lot of the legwork, and we have some things that we could draw from to get information about how it would work in Los Angeles, understanding that we're a really different city than those two.
I'm hearing, Salita, that there's clearly a demand to use these devices, particularly in the Hollywood area. Is that what you're hearing?
Yes, very much so.
So I like your strategy of let's start small, and as you know, come to CD 15 if you want to start a pilot you're more than welcome. For those who are listening, if we want to start small, we would love to be a test run in CD15. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Ms. Reynolds.
Thanks, Mr. Busquedo. Thanks, Mr. Koretz. I will concede that given everything that's going on in the world over the past 6 months, I have not given a whole ton of thought to robots on our sidewalks. But at first blush, I got to say, I am really, really skeptical of this technology. Let me ask a couple questions. I've just been looking at a couple YouTube videos of these things at work. I haven't seen one actually deliver something. I've seen one roll around the sidewalks and stuff like that. How actually do they deliver? Do they just spit something out, or does somebody have to come to the door?
My understanding is that you have to use your phone to unlock it. And so, however, there are some of these devices that do not require human interaction for them to dislodge their payload or their delivery. And so you know where that leads is if you want to pay more for a human to actually deliver your thing to your door, it becomes something that they can charge additional money for.
And you were saying that the way these probably get rolled out is there's a sort of an Amazon style truck or something that comes to a neighborhood, and then a bunch of these fan out like an invading army throughout the neighborhood.
That's one model, and then the other model is that they go direct from. So there's a Whole Foods downtown, and there are a lot of apartment buildings nearby, and so there might be some form of these that goes directly from Whole Foods to the apartment buildings, and then you have to come downstairs and actually use your device to get your groceries. And that I've also seen examples of them not in the United States and other countries being deployed in single family neighborhoods, and that are near a town center or something like that. They usually have about a like a 2-mile radius for where they can go. So there are a couple of different ways that they could be deployed. I'll just say this: it's still really early days for this technology. I think that the amount of money and the players involved in investing in the development of the technology tells you something about how much money they think there is to be saved by using this technology. But again, it's not obvious that there's a public benefit for that. That benefits the companies, but what benefit does it actually provide to the public?
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at, because I'm looking at this, and if it's the model of downtown LA and going from the Whole Foods, that's replacing the job of somebody who was doing deliveries on bike or on foot. And if you're talking about it, being coming from an Amazon truck, you still got the emissions there. And as I'm thinking about this, I'm trying to think, okay, well, what problem are they trying to solve? They're not trying to solve an environmental problem. They're not trying to solve a problem about the fact that people aren't getting deliveries at their home. They're trying to solve a problem that paying human beings costs too much. So I don't want to pilot in CD11. You can send it elsewhere. I just think this is another way to screw workers at a time when they're really on, facing the tip of the spear of a really screwed up economy that is collapsing. And I'm just thinking of the people I know, the friends I know, the neighbors I know who are, have been able to scrape by during this pandemic, doing Postmates or delivering for Grubhub or something like that. And this is like, okay, well, we're going to take that job away too. So I'm curious to see what regulations you come up with. I'm concerned this is, on balance, not a good thing. But would love to see what you come up with. So I'd recommend that we approve the motion slightly as amended, and move that the Department of Transportation and Bureau of Street Services with the assistance of the city attorney, be instructed to develop a regulatory framework for personal delivery devices that operate in the city's public right-of-way. The framework should consider, at minimum, sidewalk accessibility and utilization, the use of digital management tools, public right-of-way fees, limitations on advertising, enforcement capacity, consumer and public privacy, and what benefits, if any, are made for the good of the public.
If I can add just as a comment, Mr. Chair, Mr. Koretz, if these things are freaking you out, get ready for the drone delivery system of goods as well, because I know that's on its way.
Yeah, needless to say, not a fan of that either, except in the case of emergencies, there are situations where a drone delivery of medical supplies, I think, would be quite acceptable and appropriate, especially in the traffic that we have in Los Angeles. But other than situations where they actually supply a better service, in fact, I'm nervous enough about this concept that I have not heard anything that makes me feel like it would enable us to ban them any easier. Unless we have that point, I think I would still have to vote against this. Unless this is a study that would also take those things into account and include a possible recommendation of not allowing them.
So I will second that. I will second that direction from the chair.
Okay. All right. I mean, my last comment on this would be that of all the things happening with sidewalks right now, we've got
that too. You're right.
We've got encampments. We've got cracked, buckling sidewalks. We've got competing needs for use of space with al fresco and people trying to walk. The last thing we really need is another competing demand for our sidewalk space. But
just a note, we also have that with the returning scooters and rental bikes and all of those programs competing, which already is problematic with all those other things. Not a good match with al fresco and homeless encampments. But you add that to scooters and you add this to all that, it really becomes problematic.
Our scooters are doing well here.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Mr. White.
Council members, you have before you the original motion plus the amendments introduced by Mr. Bonin and the amendment by Mr. Koretz. I will take a voice vote count for that. Mr. Bonin.
Aye.
Mr. Buscaino.
Aye.
Mr. Koretz.
Oh, I don't know. I'll vote aye with it.
Very good. 3 ayes. The matter passes with the amendments.
Okay, I believe that clears the desk. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Adjourned. Go vote.
Thank you.
Go vote.
Thank
Go
you.
vote.
Go vote.
Yes, everybody needs to vote. Bye.